spread in the population. And they also misunderstood it. Some people thought we were suggesting that you should be mean to or discriminate against people who are overweight, or that you should cut your friendship ties with people. You should choose your friends based on their weight status. We're not suggesting any of that. So, so we were very surprised, to be honest, not only by the amount of attention the paper got, but by the kind of attention the paper got. The smoking paper got some attention as well, but it was a bit less controversial, actually. Perhaps because the topic wasn't as personal. But I think we're at an interesting historical moment in network science. I think that networks have been a focus of inquiry for at least 100 years. It depends on how you define networks, actually potentially for even longer. But some of the canonical or most famous descriptions of networks were by a German German-speaking sociologist by the name of Georg Simmel, who talked a little bit about triadic closure and other kinds of network ideas 100 years ago. And then there's been a sequence of waves of interest in networks. So Jacob Levy-Moreno did some work in the 1930s. There was a kind of resurrection of network science in the 1950s, then again in the 1970s. In the 1990s, you had sort of the invasion of the physicists, and a bunch of very classic papers that were published by Duncan Watts and Laszlo Barabashi. Actually, in the 1970s, it was Mark Granovator's very famous work, Mark Newman more recently. Anyway, my point is that a bunch of people sort of in the 1990s moved into develop the science and mathematics of networks. And all this happened at the same time that the internet was invented, or at least was invented for everyday people to use. So I think what happened is the person on the street started thinking of their lives more in network terms, could visualize themselves as nodes on a network. And actually very recently now we have Facebook and MySpace and all these explicitly social networking sites. So I think what's interesting is that we have increasing popular taste and interest in social networks, simultaneously increased advances in the scientific methods and basis for social networks. And so I think therefore that, and increasing numbers of academics and scholars who are researching social networks. So I think that the ideas and the discoveries of people, such as all the people that are at this conference, about social networks captivates people's attention. You know, you can start thinking of crime as a process that spreads in social networks, or you can start thinking of voting behavior as something that spreads in social networks, or political behavior, criminal behavior, economic behavior, health behavior. All of these things now people are beginning to think of in network terms. I think that at this meeting we have economists and sociologists and physicists and statisticians, and we just actually had a similar meeting at Harvard with similar specialties plus others, political science and people who would call themselves network scientists, actually systems biologists, people that are interested in networks and biology. I think that there is a wide recognition that the understanding of networks is important in multiple disciplines, and that advances made in one discipline can be used by people working in another discipline. So there are certain fundamental problems in social networks that maybe are solved in some other group. You know, just because someone in another discipline solves this problem doesn't mean that I shouldn't take advantage of it. Quite the opposite. I should take advantage of it. So I think that there is a lot of intellectual exchange that's happening right now. Conferences such as this are one of many similar conferences where people get together from broad disciplines. I also think that the problems are in understanding social networks are enormous. And the empirical problems, the problems, as we would say, of estimation or of causal inference, of understanding what's actually happening in the network, are very, very hard. And they require advances in data. They require advances in statistics. They require advances in theory. They require advances on all of those fronts. And I think that the interdisciplinarity is necessary in order to be able to understand social networks. Plus, it's much more interesting. Speaking as a physician and as a sociologist, I love coming to meetings like this and interacting with people from other disciplines, and I learn a lot. And so I think that the subject matter drives the interdisciplinarity, and I think the interdisciplinarity enhances our ability to understand the subject.